The snow fell thick and relentless across the Colorado plains that December morning in 1881, and Olivia Calloway stood alone on the porch of the abandoned trading post, watching the last wagon disappear into the white horizon without her. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart pound beneath layers of wool and cotton. The wagon train had left Georgetown 3 days ago, heading west toward California, before the mountain passes became completely impassable. She had paid her fare, packed her few belongings, and prepared herself for the journey to start a new life far from the memories that haunted her in this mining town. But then her trunk had gone missing that morning, the one containing all her money sewn into the lining, her mother's jewelry, and the documents proving her ownership of a small property in Sacramento that her late father had left her. The wagon master had refused to wait while she searched, citing the weather and the dangerous delay. So here she stood, 22 years old and utterly alone, 15 miles outside of Georgetown at this desolate trading post where they had stopped for the night. The wind howled across the empty plains, cutting through her layers like they were nothing. She had enough food for perhaps 2 days if she rationed carefully, and the trading post, though abandoned for the season, at least had 4 walls and a roof. The owner had headed south for the winter months, leaving the place locked up tight, but Olivia had found a window with a loose shutter that allowed her entry. She told herself it was not truly breaking in, not when her survival depended on shelter. Inside, the trading post smelled of old leather, tobacco, and dust. Shelves lined the walls, mostly empty now except for a few items deemed not worth transporting. She found some candles, a half-full jar of preserved peaches, and a wool blanket that smelled of horse but would keep her warmer than her own thin shawl. The potbelly stove in the corner was her salvation, and she found enough wood stacked outside to keep it burning for a few days at least. As darkness fell that first night, Olivia sat close to the stove and allowed herself to cry. She had been holding back tears since dawn, maintaining her composure as she had argued with the wagon master, as she had watched her only chance at escape roll away into the white wilderness. Now, alone with only the wind for company, she let the sobs come. She cried for her father, dead 2 years now in a mining accident. She cried for her mother, taken by pneumonia the previous winter. She cried for herself, for the loneliness that had become her constant companion, for the well-meaning but suffocating sympathy of the Georgetown townspeople who saw her as a charity case, and for the particular attentions of Thomas Whitmore, the banker's son, who had made it clear he expected her to accept his marriage proposal out of sheer desperation. That was why she had planned to leave, why she had sold everything she could spare and booked passage on that wagon train. She would not marry without love. She would not become Thomas Whitmore's wife simply because she had no other options. But now, stranded in this abandoned building as snow piled high against the windows, her options had narrowed to simple survival. The second day brought no relief. The storm intensified, the wind shrieking around the corners of the building like something alive and angry. Olivia kept the fire going, melted snow for water, and tried not to think about what would happen when her meager supplies ran out. She explored the trading post thoroughly, finding little of use. A few rusty traps hung on the wall, some old newspapers from the previous spring, a deck of playing cards with 3 cards missing, and a dusty Bible on a shelf behind the counter. She read the newspapers to pass the time, then moved on to the Bible, though she found little comfort in its pages. Where was God in this frozen wasteland? Where was divine providence when she needed it most? On the third day, the storm finally broke. Olivia woke to silence, a sudden and complete absence of wind that was almost eerie after days of constant howling. She pushed open the door, struggling against the drift that had accumulated against it, and stepped out into a world transformed into white. The snow reached nearly to her knees in the shallowest places, and the drifts rose high as her shoulders against the building's walls. The sky was a pale, clear blue, painfully bright against the endless white landscape. The cold bit at her exposed skin immediately, and she retreated inside after only a few minutes. She knew she should try to return to Georgetown. 15 miles was not an impossible distance, but in these conditions, with snow this deep and no proper winter gear, she would likely freeze to death before making it halfway. Better to stay here, to keep the fire going, to hope that someone would pass by or that she could make the journey once the snow had melted somewhat. But the wood supply was dwindling faster than she had hoped, and the food was nearly gone. She had eaten the last of the preserved peaches that morning, savoring each small piece, trying to make it last. The afternoon of that third day she heard it, the sound of hoofbeats, muffled by snow but unmistakable. Olivia rushed to the window, her heart leaping with hope. A rider was approaching, a lone figure on a gray horse moving slowly through the deep snow. She flung open the door and stepped out onto the porch, waving her arms. "Hello, please, hello." The rider's head turned toward her, and he altered his course, guiding his horse toward the trading post. As he drew closer, Olivia could make out more details. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a heavy coat and wide-brimmed hat dusted with snow. A dark scarf covered the lower half of his face, protection against the brutal cold. He pulled up in front of the porch, and his horse, a sturdy gray mare, snorted and stamped, her breath creating clouds of vapor in the frigid air. "Madam," the rider said, his voice slightly muffled by the scarf. He pulled it down, revealing a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of dark stubble and a mouth set in a serious line. His eyes, a striking pale blue, studied her with a mixture of surprise and concern. "What are you doing out here?" "I was left behind," Olivia said, hating how her voice shook, whether from cold or emotion she could not say. "The wagon train I was traveling with, they left without me 3 days ago. I have been sheltering here." The man dismounted, his movements stiff from long hours in the saddle and the cold. He was indeed tall, standing well over 6 feet, and despite the heavy coat, she could tell he was powerfully built. He appeared to be somewhere in his late 20s, his face weathered by sun and wind in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors. "You have been here alone for 3 days." He looked around, taking in the isolated location, the depth of the snow. "You are lucky to be alive, madam. That storm was a bad one." "I know," Olivia said. "I found shelter inside. The owner is gone for the winter, but I needed somewhere to stay." He nodded, not judging her for the slight transgression. "I am sure old Joseph would understand. I am Austin Caldwell. I work a ranch about 20 miles northwest of here. I was in Denver on business and got caught by the storm. I have been making my way back since it cleared." "Olivia Calloway," she said. "From Georgetown, Georgetown. That is a fair distance in the other direction. How did you end up here?" She explained about the wagon train, the missing trunk, the wagon master's refusal to wait. As she spoke, Austin's expression grew darker, his jaw tightening. "That is a sorry way to treat a woman," he said when she finished. "Leaving you behind like that. What kind of man does such a thing?" "A practical one, I suppose," Olivia said, though the words tasted bitter. "He had a schedule to keep and other passengers to consider. The passes through the mountains close fast once winter sets in properly." "Practical," Austin repeated, shaking his head. "Come on. Let us get out of this cold. We need to figure out what to do next." They went inside, and Austin took in the sparse interior of the trading post with a quick, assessing gaze. He saw the dwindling wood pile, the empty jar that had contained the peaches, the single thin blanket Olivia had been using. His expression grew more concerned. "You have no food left." "Not much," she admitted. "A bit of hardtack, some coffee grounds. I was hoping to make it last until I could get back to Georgetown or until someone came by." Austin immediately went to his horse, which he had led around to the small lean-to stable behind the building, and returned with his saddlebags. From them, he produced a package wrapped in oilcloth containing dried beef, some biscuits, and a small sack of beans. "It is not much, but it is better than nothing," he said, setting the food on the counter. "We will make a hot meal. When did you last eat something substantial?" "Yesterday morning," Olivia said, trying to keep the hunger out of her voice. Austin built up the fire while Olivia prepared the food according to his instructions. They worked in companionable silence, and soon the smell of cooking beans and toasted biscuits filled the small space. Olivia's stomach growled audibly and she blushed, but Austin only smiled slightly. "Nothing to be ashamed of. Hunger is honest." They ate together, sitting on two old crates near the stove. The food was simple but tasted better than anything Olivia could remember eating in recent memory. Austin ate efficiently, without waste or fuss, and she found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. He had a strong profile, a straight nose that looked like it might have been broken once, and those unusual pale eyes that seemed to notice everything. His hands were large and work-roughened, the hands of a man who made his living through physical labor. "You said you work a ranch," she asked, more to break the silence than out of real curiosity. "My family's place. The Caldwell Ranch, about 400 acres. We run cattle, some horses. It is not the biggest spread in Colorado, but it provides." "You have a large family." Something flickered across his face, a shadow of pain quickly suppressed. "Not anymore. My parents passed 5 years back. Fever took them both within a week of each other. My older brother, he died in the war. It is just me and my younger sister, Clara. She is 18 now, keeps the house running while I handle the stock and the land." "I am sorry for your losses," Olivia said softly. "I understand something of it. I lost both my parents recently as well. My father in a mining accident, my mother to pneumonia." Austin met her eyes, and in his gaze she saw genuine understanding. "It is a hard thing, being alone in the world." "Yes," she agreed. "It is." They finished the meal, and then Austin stood, looking out the window at the late afternoon sun. "We have a few hours of daylight left. Not enough to make it anywhere tonight, but enough for me to gather more firewood. That supply will not get us through another night, let alone long enough for the roads to be passable again." "Us?" Olivia asked. "You are staying?" Austin looked at her as if she had said something absurd. "Of course I am staying. I cannot leave you here alone. What kind of man would that make me?" Relief and something else, something warm and unexpected, flooded through Olivia. "Thank you," she said. "Truly. You have no obligation to me, but I am grateful." "Every obligation," Austin corrected quietly. "You are a woman alone in the wilderness in winter. Any decent person would do the same." He went out to chop wood, and Olivia cleaned up from their meal, using melted snow to wash the few dishes they had used. Through the window, she could see Austin working, his axe rising and falling with steady, practiced rhythm. He had removed his coat despite the cold, and she could see the play of muscles beneath his shirt as he worked. She looked away, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. It was improper to notice such things, especially about a man who was only helping her out of common decency. But it had been so long since anyone had shown her such simple, straightforward kindness. In Georgetown, Kindness had always come with expectations or pity. Thomas Whitmore's attentions had been possessive and presumptuous. The townspeople's concern had been genuine but smothering, making her feel like a burden, a poor unfortunate creature to be managed and directed. Austin's help felt different. He treated her like an equal who had fallen on hard luck, not like a helpless child or a charity case. That night, they sat by the stove as darkness fell outside. Austin had brought in enough wood to last several days, stacking it neatly against the wall. He had also brought in his bedroll and blanket from his horse, insisting that Olivia take the better blanket while he made do with his traveling gear. "Tell me about Georgetown," he said as they sat in the flickering firelight. "I have passed through once or twice, but never stayed long." Olivia told him about the mining town, about its rapid growth as silver strikes brought fortune seekers from across the country. She described the boarding house where she had lived after her parents died, working as a seamstress to pay her room and board. She talked about the constant noise of the stamp mills, the dust that seemed to coat everything, the stark divide between those who struck it rich and those who labored in the mines for wages barely sufficient to survive. "It sounds like you were not sorry to leave," Austin observed. "No," Olivia admitted. "I had nothing left there but memories, most of them sad. My father had won a small property in a card game years ago, a piece of land in California with a house on it. When he died, it passed to my mother and then to me. I thought I could start over there, make a new life. But now," she gestured helplessly at their surroundings, "now you are stuck in an abandoned trading post with a stranger in the middle of a Colorado winter," Austin finished. "That is quite a change in plans." "I seem to be very good at having my plans disrupted," Olivia said with a rueful smile. "Plans are overrated," Austin said. "In my experience, life does what it wants regardless of what we plan. Better to adapt than to cling too tight to something that is not working." "Is that what you did after your family died? Adapted?" Austin was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I had to. The ranch needed running, and Clara needed someone to look after her. I was 23 and had never expected to be responsible for everything. My older brother, he was the one who was supposed to inherit, who was trained for it. But you do what needs doing, even when you feel completely unprepared. You must have managed well. You are still running the ranch." "Some days better than others," Austin said, "but we are surviving, and that is something." They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing more easily than Olivia would have expected. Austin spoke little about himself without prompting, but he was an excellent listener, asking thoughtful questions and seeming genuinely interested in her answers. She found herself telling him things she had not shared with anyone, about her loneliness after her parents' deaths, about the pressure she had felt to accept Thomas Whitmore's proposal, about her dreams of starting fresh somewhere no one knew her or her history. "Why did you not want to marry this Thomas?" Austin asked. "Is he cruel?" "No, not cruel, just persistent, certain that he knows what is best for everyone, especially me. He is the sort of man who believes he is doing you a favor by offering marriage, and that you should be grateful for his interest. He never once asked what I wanted. He simply assumed I would be reasonable and accept." "And you want to be more than reasonable," Austin said. It was not a question. "I want to be loved," Olivia said quietly. "Is that foolish, to hold out for something that might not exist?" "No," Austin said firmly. "That is not foolish. That is brave. Plenty of people settle for less because it is easier or safer. Refusing to do that, especially when you are being pressured, that takes courage." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected and hot. No one had ever called her brave before. Foolish, stubborn, impractical, yes, but never brave. "Thank you," she whispered. Austin looked at her across the firelight, his pale eyes intent. "You do not need to thank me for speaking the truth." They fell into silence after that, but it was a comfortable one. Eventually, Austin stood and banked the fire so it would burn low through the night without consuming all their wood. He laid out his bedroll on the far side of the room, giving Olivia as much privacy and propriety as the small space allowed. "Sleep well, Miss Calloway," he said. "Olivia," she corrected. "Please, just Olivia. After 3 days alone in a storm and your kindness today, I think we can dispense with formalities." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Olivia, then, and you can call me Austin. Good night, Austin. Good night." Olivia wrapped herself in the blanket, using her small travel bag as a pillow, and listened to Austin's breathing gradually slow and deepen as he fell asleep. She felt safer than she had in days, perhaps safer than she had felt since her father died. There was something solid and dependable about Austin, something that made her believe he would keep his word, that he would not abandon her as the wagon train had done. The next morning brought clear, bright weather, though the cold was still intense. Austin went out early to check on his horse and to assess the snow conditions. When he returned, his expression was serious. "The snow is still too deep for easy travel, especially for a horse carrying 2 riders. Another day or two and it should settle enough to make the journey safer. We can wait it out here, or we can try to push through today and risk getting stuck or the horse going lame." "I trust your judgment," Olivia said. "You know this country better than I do." Austin nodded, looking almost relieved that she was not going to argue or insist on immediate departure. "We will give it another day, then. Use the time to rest and prepare properly." That day, they fell into an easy routine. Austin took care of the heavier tasks, chopping more wood, tending his horse, checking and repairing a loose board on the stable lean-to. Olivia managed the interior, rationing their limited food supplies, keeping the fire going, melting snow for water. They worked separately but always aware of each other's presence, and Olivia found herself looking up frequently to watch Austin through the window or to see where he was when he came inside. In the afternoon, they played cards with the incomplete deck they had found, making up new rules to account for the missing cards. Austin was competitive but fair, and his rare laugh when Olivia won a hand was a deep, pleasant sound that she found herself wanting to hear again. "Where did you learn to play cards like that?" he asked after she won 3 hands in a row. "My father taught me. He said a woman should know how to handle herself in any situation, and that included knowing whether the man across the card table from her was cheating." "And can you tell?" Olivia gave him a mischievous smile. "You are not cheating if that is what you are worried about. You are actually quite terrible at bluffing." Austin laughed again. "I will have to remember never to play against you for money." As evening fell, they prepared another simple meal together. Olivia found herself acutely aware of Austin's presence in the small space, of the way his hand brushed hers when he handed her a tin cup, of how he was careful to give her plenty of room to move around the limited area. He was considerate in a dozen small ways, always making sure she was warm enough, that she had the first and largest portion of food, that she had the more comfortable seat near the fire. "You must think me quite helpless," she said as they ate. "The way you have been taking care of everything." Austin looked surprised. "I do not think that at all. You survived 3 days alone in a blizzard. Most people would not have managed that. But there is no shame in accepting help when you need it, and right now, I have the knowledge and resources to make things easier for both of us. If our situations were reversed, I would hope you would do the same for me." "I would," Olivia said immediately. "Of course I would. Then we understand each other." That night, their conversation turned more personal again. Austin asked about her childhood, and she told him about growing up in a series of mining camps and small towns as her father chased one silver strike after another. It had been an unstable life, but not an unhappy one. Her parents had loved each other deeply, and that love had created a sense of home no matter where they were living. "That is what I want," Olivia said, surprising herself with the admission. "Not wealth or status or security, though those things would be nice, but what my parents had. That partnership, that certainty that someone is always on your side." "My parents had that too," Austin said quietly. "Even in their last days, when the fever had them both so weak they could barely speak, they held hands. My father died first, and my mother only lasted a few hours after. I think she could not bear to be without him." "That is beautiful," Olivia said, "and heartbreaking." "Most beautiful things are," Austin replied. He looked at her across the fire, his expression unreadable. "You will find that, Olivia, what you are looking for. You are the kind of person who deserves it." "How can you know that? You have only known me for 2 days." "Some things you just know," Austin said. "Some people you just recognize." The air between them felt charged suddenly, full of something Olivia did not have a name for. She looked into Austin's eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch. But before she could identify it or respond to it, Austin looked away, breaking the moment. "We should get some rest," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Tomorrow will be a long day if we are going to attempt the journey back to Georgetown." Olivia nodded, though part of her wanted to protest, to ask him to explain what he had meant. But she held her tongue, wrapping herself in her blanket and trying to calm her racing heart. She was being foolish, reading too much into a kind man's words. Austin was helping her because it was the right thing to do, not because he felt anything particular for her. To imagine otherwise was to set herself up for disappointment. But as she drifted off to sleep, she could not stop thinking about the look in his eyes, about the way he had said "some people you just recognize." The next morning dawned clear and slightly warmer, or at least less brutally cold. Austin went out early to assess conditions and returned with better news. "The snow is settling. It will still be slow going, but I think we can make it. We will go to the ranch first. It is much closer than Georgetown. You can rest there, get a proper meal and a real bed, and then I will take you back to town when the roads are fully clear." "I do not want to impose on your sister," Olivia said, though the thought of a real bed and a hot meal made her nearly weak with longing. "You are not imposing. Clara will be happy to have another woman around. She gets tired of my company." They packed up their few belongings, making sure to leave the trading post as tidy as they had found it. Austin left some coins on the counter, payment for the food and firewood they had used. Then they mounted his horse, Olivia sitting behind Austin with her arms around his waist. She tried not to think about how solid he felt beneath her hands, how she could feel the warmth of him even through layers of clothing. The journey to the Caldwell ranch took most of the day. The snow was indeed settling, but it was still deep enough to make travel slow and difficult. Austin guided his horse with patient skill, never pushing the animal beyond what was safe. They stopped once to rest the horse and to eat some of the remaining food. Austin gave Olivia his coat during the stop, ignoring her protests. "You are shaking with cold," he said firmly. "I am used to this weather. You are not." She wanted to argue but found she could not. The coat was warm from his body heat, and it smelled of leather and something clean and masculine that was distinctly Austin. She pulled it close around her, grateful for the warmth and for his care. As afternoon was fading into evening, they crested a low rise and Austin pointed ahead. "There. That is home." Olivia looked and saw a valley below them, sheltered and relatively clear of snow. A ranch house stood at the center, built of solid logs with a wide porch and smoke rising from two chimneys. Outbuildings surrounded it, including a large barn, a stable, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Cattle grazed in a near pasture, dark shapes against the white snow. It looked peaceful and permanent, a place that had weathered many storms and would weather many more. "It is beautiful," Olivia said. Austin looked back at her, and she saw pleasure at her words warm his expression. "I think so. I am glad you see it." They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the house, the front door flew open. A young woman rushed out onto the porch, not even bothering with a coat despite the cold. "Austin, thank God, I have been so worried." This had to be Clara. She was tall and sturdy, built like her brother, with the same dark hair, though hers fell in a long braid down her back. Her face was open and expressive, pretty in a wholesome way, and her eyes, a darker blue than Austin's, were bright with relief. Austin dismounted and helped Olivia down, then was immediately enveloped in a fierce hug from his sister. "3 days overdue," Clara said, her voice muffled against Austin's chest. 3 days. I thought you were dead in a ditch somewhere." "I am fine, Clara. I got caught in the storm and had to wait it out, but I found someone who needed help." He gently extricated himself from his sister's embrace and gestured to Olivia. "This is Olivia Calloway from Georgetown. She was left behind by her wagon train at the trading post. Olivia, this is my sister, Clara." Clara's expression immediately shifted from relief to concern. "Left behind? In that storm? Oh, you poor thing. Come inside immediately, you must be frozen through." Before Olivia could respond, Clara had taken her arm and was pulling her toward the house. Austin followed, leading his horse, a small smile on his face at his sister's enthusiastic welcome. The interior of the ranch house was warm and welcoming, simply furnished but clean and comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, with a fire burning cheerfully. Handmade rugs covered the wood floor and curtains hung at the windows. It felt like a home, lived in and loved. Sit by the fire," Clara instructed, guiding Olivia to a sturdy rocking chair near the hearth. "Austin, put on coffee, and heat some of that stew from last night. This poor woman looks half-starved." Austin obeyed without argument, moving into the attached kitchen area with familiar ease. Olivia watched him, surprised by how natural he looked in this domestic setting. He seemed completely comfortable, measuring coffee grounds and stoking the kitchen stove. Clara pulled up another chair and sat facing Olivia, her expression sympathetic. "Tell me everything. What happened?" Olivia went through the story again, and Clara's face reflected outrage and compassion in equal measure. "That wagon master should be horsewhipped," she declared when Olivia finished. "Leaving a woman behind like that, unconscionable." "It was not ideal," Olivia agreed diplomatically. "Not ideal. It was criminal. You could have died. But I did not, thanks to your brother. He has been very kind." Clara glanced over at Austin, who was carefully not looking at either of them as he prepared the meal. A strange expression crossed her face, something knowing and pleased. "Yes, Austin is good at taking care of people, sometimes too good. He forgets to take care of himself, Clara," Austin warned. "What? It is true. You work yourself into the ground on this ranch and you never complain or ask for help. I have plenty of help, I have you. I mean real help. Another pair of hands for the heavy work. You cannot do everything yourself." This was clearly an old argument, and Austin ended it by bringing over 2 cups of coffee and handing one to Olivia and one to his sister. "Drink. You are getting worked up over nothing." But Clara was not finished. She turned back to Olivia. "How long are you staying? You must stay at least until you have recovered your strength. A few days of decent food and rest will do you good." "I do not want to impose," Olivia began. "Nonsense, it is no imposition." I would love the company, and this house is too big for just Austin and me anyway. We have 3 spare bedrooms, all sitting empty. You would be doing me a favor. I am desperate for another woman to talk to." Olivia looked at Austin, who shrugged. "You are welcome to stay as long as you need." And Clara is right, the company will do her good. She has been cooped up here through the storm with no one but me to talk to. "Then I accept gratefully," Olivia said, "but only for a few days. I do not want to overstay my welcome." Clara beamed. "Excellent. You and I are going to be great friends, I can tell." That evening was one of the most pleasant Olivia had experienced in a long time. Clara was cheerful and talkative, with a sharp sense of humor and an easy laugh. She fussed over Olivia in a way that felt caring rather than smothering, making sure she had enough to eat, that her coffee cup was always full, that she was warm and comfortable. The stew was delicious, rich and hearty with tender meat and vegetables, and there was fresh bread to go with it, baked that morning before Clara knew her brother would be returning. After dinner, Clara showed Olivia to one of the spare bedrooms, a comfortable room with a real bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the valley. Someone, probably Clara, had already laid a fire in the small fireplace, and the room was pleasantly warm. "There are clean clothes in the dresser, things I have outgrown or made and never wore. You are a bit smaller than me, but we can alter anything that does not fit, and there is a bathing room just down the hall. Austin built it special, with a copper tub and a water heater. We can draw you a bath if you would like." "That sounds like heaven," Olivia admitted. Clara smiled. "I will get it ready. You just rest." An hour later, Olivia sank into hot water for the first time in over a week, and the feeling was so glorious she nearly wept. Clara had provided soap that smelled of lavender and a soft cloth for washing. Olivia scrubbed away days of accumulated grime and stress, washed her hair twice, and then simply soaked, feeling the heat seep into her bones and ease muscles she had not realized were tense. When she finally emerged, clean and dressed in a borrowed nightgown and robe, she found Clara waiting with a brush. "May I? Your hair is so beautiful, so long and thick. I love brushing hair." Olivia sat and let Clara brush out her damp hair, the rhythmic motion soothing. They talked quietly, Clara asking questions about Georgetown and Olivia's life there, sharing stories about the ranch and her life with Austin. "He has sacrificed so much for me," Clara said softly. "When our parents died, he could have sold the ranch, split the money, and we each could have gone our own way. But he kept it running because he knew it was what our father wanted, and because he wanted me to have a stable home. He has never complained, not once, but I know it is hard. The work is endless and he has no time for anything else. No time for courting or going to town socials or just living his life." "He seems content," Olivia said carefully. "He seems resigned," Clara corrected. "It is not the same thing, but maybe now things will change." "What do you mean?" Clara smiled mysteriously. "Nothing, just a feeling I have. There, your hair is done. You should sleep. You look exhausted." Olivia was exhausted, and the bed was soft and warm. She fell asleep almost immediately and slept more deeply than she had in months, with no bad dreams to disturb her rest. The next few days fell into a comfortable pattern. Olivia recovered her strength quickly with regular meals and proper rest. She insisted on helping with the household tasks, and Clara was happy to accept her assistance. They cooked together, cleaned together, and worked on some sewing projects Clara had been neglecting. Olivia taught Clara some of the fancier stitches she had learned as a seamstress, and Clara taught Olivia how to make bread that rose light and high every time. Austin was often out during the day, checking on his cattle, repairing fence lines damaged by the storm, and handling the countless other tasks that running a ranch demanded. But he joined them for meals, and in the evenings, they would all sit by the fire together. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes Austin read aloud from a book while the women worked on their sewing, and sometimes they played cards or board games. It felt like family, like home, and Olivia found herself dreading the day when she would have to leave, because she knew she would have to leave. This was not her home. These were not her people, no matter how much she was coming to care for them. Georgetown was waiting with Thomas Whitmore and his insistent proposals, with the well-meaning townspeople and their pitying looks. She would have to return to collect what few possessions she had left behind and to try to figure out her next step. The property in California was still hers, if she could find a way to get there. Perhaps she could work and save until she had enough for the journey. But the thought of leaving made her heart ache in a way she did not fully understand. She told herself it was simply because she had been lonely for so long, and the Caldwells had been so kind. Of course, she did not want to give that up. It had nothing to do with the way her breath caught when Austin smiled at her across the dinner table, or the way her skin felt warm when his hand accidentally brushed hers, or the way she had caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her pulse race. She was not falling in love with Austin Caldwell. That would be foolish and pointless. He was a rancher with a life and responsibilities here, and she was a woman with nothing to her name, planning to move to California. Even if he did feel something for her, which she could not be sure of, there was no future in it. Better to guard her heart, to enjoy this brief respite and then to move on as planned. But her heart, it seemed, had other ideas. It was the little things that got to her. The way Austin always made sure she had the warmest seat near the fire. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, as if her words mattered. The way he laughed at her jokes, that rare, deep laugh that made her feel clever and delightful. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, with an expression of such longing it made her chest tight. Or maybe she was imagining it. Maybe she wanted so badly for him to feel something that she was seeing signs that were not really there. A week after her arrival at the ranch, the weather turned pleasant, relatively speaking. The snow was melting rapidly in the warmer temperatures, and the roads were becoming passable again. Austin mentioned at breakfast that he could take her back to Georgetown in the next day or two if she wished. "Oh, must she go so soon?" Clara asked, her face falling. "I have so enjoyed having her here." "I have imposed long enough," Olivia said, though the words felt like glass in her throat. "You have both been so kind, but I need to get back to my life." "What life awaits you in Georgetown?" Austin asked quietly. "You said yourself you had nothing there you wanted to return to." "I have my belongings, what little I still own, and I need to work to save money for passage to California." "Or," Clara said slowly, glancing at her brother, "you could stay here. We could use help around the ranch. The house is too much for me to manage alone, especially during spring and summer when Austin is out from dawn to dark, and we sometimes have ranch hands staying in the bunkhouse who need feeding. I could pay you wages and you would have room and board." Olivia's heart leaped, but she forced herself to be practical. "Clara, that is a generous offer, but I could not take money for helping around the house. You have already done so much for me." "Then do not think of it as helping me. Think of it as a job. I am serious about needing the help. And Austin can always use an extra pair of hands with the stock. Can you ride?" "A little. My father taught me the basics." Clara looked triumphantly at her brother. "There, you see, she can ride. You are always complaining about having to check the far pastures alone. Olivia could go with you. Two sets of eyes are better than one for spotting trouble." Austin's expression was carefully neutral. Olivia might have other plans, we should not pressure her, but Clara was undeterred. "Please, Olivia, at least think about it. Stay a while longer, see how you like it here. If you decide you still want to go to California in a few months, We will understand. But give it a chance." Olivia looked at Austin, trying to read his expression. Did he want her to stay? Or was he too polite to contradict his sister's impulsive offer? She could not tell, and the uncertainty was agonizing. "What do you think?" she asked him directly. "Would it be acceptable to you if I stayed?" Austin met her eyes, and for a moment she saw everything she had been hoping for there, clear as day. Longing and desire and something that looked like hope. "I would like it very much if you stayed," he said quietly, "but only if it is what you want. Not because you feel obligated or because you have nowhere else to go, only if you want to be here." "I do want to be here," Olivia said, the truth of it settling into her bones. "I have been happier this past week than I have been in years. If you truly need the help and do not mind my presence, then yes, I would like to stay, at least for a while." Clara let out a whoop of joy and jumped up to hug Olivia fiercely. "This is wonderful. You will see, you are going to love it here." Austin said nothing, but when Olivia looked at him, he was smiling, really smiling, and the warmth in his eyes made her dizzy. That afternoon, Austin asked if she would like to ride out with him to check some of the fence lines. Clara insisted Olivia take one of her split skirts for riding and helped her lace up a pair of sturdy boots. Austin saddled 2 horses, his gray mare and a gentler brown gelding for Olivia. "This is Rusty," he said, introducing her to the horse. "He is old and steady, perfect for someone still learning." Olivia patted Rusty's nose and the horse whuffed softly, his dark eyes liquid and calm. She mounted with Austin's help, settling into the saddle with only a little awkwardness. It had been years since she had ridden, but the basics came back quickly. They rode out together across the snowy pastures. The day was bright and clear, the sky a brilliant blue, and the mountains rose dramatic and snow capped in the distance. Austin pointed out landmarks, explaining the layout of his property, where the boundaries were, which pastures he used for what purposes. Olivia listened and watched, seeing how much he loved this land, how deeply rooted he was here. They stopped at a fence line where some of the posts had been damaged in the storm. Austin dismounted and began making repairs, working with quick efficiency. Olivia stayed mounted, watching and learning. He worked in silence for a while, then spoke without looking up from his task. "I am glad you are staying." "So am I," Olivia said softly. "I know Clara said we need the help, and we do, but that is not why I am glad." He straightened, looking up at her. "I am glad because I do not want you to leave. Because these past few days with you here have been the best I have had in a long time. Because when I imagine the house without you in it, it feels empty in a way it has not felt empty before." Olivia's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "Austin." "You do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know you barely know me, but I wanted to be honest. I wanted you to know that you are not just help to me. You are not just Clara's friend or a woman I happened to find at a trading post. You are important. You matter." Olivia dismounted, needing to be on the same level as him for this conversation. She walked over to where he stood, close enough to see the flecks of darker blue in his pale eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body despite the cold air. "You matter to me too," she said. "I have been trying not to feel it, trying to tell myself it was gratitude or loneliness or anything else. But the truth is, I care about you, Austin. More than I should, considering we have only known each other a week. More than is probably wise." "Why is it not wise?" Austin asked, his voice low. "Because I have nothing to offer you. No money, no property, no family connections. I am just a woman with a past full of loss and a future that is uncertain at best. You deserve someone better." Austin reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted, and took her hand. His touch was gentle, his calloused palm warm against hers. "You have everything to offer," he said. "You have courage and kindness and a strength that amazes me. You survived things that would have broken other people. You refused to settle for a loveless marriage even when it would have been easier. You are exactly the kind of person I want in my life, Olivia. Exactly." "You barely know me," she whispered, even as her hand tightened around his. "I know enough," Austin said. "I know that you make Clara laugh. I know that you do not complain even when you have every right to. I know that you see the beauty in this place the way I do. I know that when you smile at me, I forget how to breathe. That is enough to start with, do not you think? And if it does not work out, if we discover we do not suit after all, then we will deal with it. But I would rather try and fail than never try at all. Would you not?" Olivia thought of her parents, of the love they had shared, of how her mother had said once that the moment she met her father, she knew. She had been skeptical then, dismissing it as romanticism. But standing here now with Austin's hand in hers, with his eyes on hers and her heart racing, she understood. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I would rather try." Austin's smile was brilliant, transforming his face. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture that was both old-fashioned and achingly sweet. "Then we will try," he said. "We will see where this goes. No promises, no pressure, just honest effort." "Honest effort," Olivia agreed. They mounted their horses again and continued their circuit of the ranch, but something had shifted between them. The air felt charged, full of possibility. They talked more freely now, asking and answering the kinds of questions that mattered. What they wanted from life, what they feared, what they dreamed of when they let themselves dream. Austin told her about his plans for the ranch, about wanting to improve the herd, maybe breed some horses as well as cattle. Olivia told him about her mother teaching her to sew, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful from mere fabric and thread. "You could do that here," Austin said. "Clara would love to learn more fancy sewing. And the women in the area are always looking for someone skilled to help with special projects, wedding dresses and the like. You could build a small business if you wanted." The idea sent a thrill through Olivia. She had not thought beyond mere survival for so long that the concept of actually building something, of having a purpose and a place, seemed almost too good to be true. "I would like that," she said. When they returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, Clara took one look at them and smiled knowingly. "I am guessing the fence repairs went well." "Very well," Austin said, and the look he gave Olivia made her blush. Clara laughed. "Good, it is about time." The next few weeks were some of the happiest of Olivia's life. She settled into the ranch as if she had always been there. She worked alongside Clara, managing the household and taking on sewing projects from women in the surrounding area, who were delighted to find someone with her skills so close by. She learned to cook the hearty meals that ranch work demanded, to churn butter and bake bread and preserve fruits and vegetables. She learned to ride better, accompanying Austin on his rounds, learning the rhythms of ranch life, and she fell deeper in love with Austin Caldwell every single day. He courted her properly, with a sweetness and respect that made her heart ache. He brought her wildflowers that somehow survived the lingering snow. He took her on rides to his favorite spots on the ranch, places where the view was spectacular or where a creek ran clear and cold. He talked to her about everything, seeking her opinion, valuing her thoughts. And he was patient, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, content to progress slowly. Their first real kiss happened on a mild evening in early February. They had ridden out to check on a pregnant cow in a far pasture, and on the way back, they had stopped to watch the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Austin had dismounted to help Olivia down, and somehow she ended up in his arms, close enough to see the way his pulse beat at his throat, close enough to smell the scent of horses and leather and clean sweat that was distinctly him. "Olivia," he said, her name a question and a prayer. "Yes," she answered, not even sure what she was agreeing to, only knowing that she wanted whatever he was offering. He kissed her then, softly at first, almost tentative. But when she responded, rising on her toes to get closer, wrapping her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and claiming. His arms tightened around her, holding her close, and she felt safe and desired and treasured all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I am sorry if it is too soon to say it, but I do. I love you, Olivia." Tears sprang to her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too, so much. I did not think I could feel this way, but I do." He kissed her again, sweeter this time, and then held her close as the sun finished setting and the stars began to emerge. That night, Austin spoke to Clara privately, though Olivia could guess what the conversation was about. The next morning, Clara cornered Olivia in the kitchen while Austin was out in the barn. "He is going to ask you to marry him," Clara said without preamble. "I just want to make sure you know what you are getting into. Ranching is hard work, and it is a hard life sometimes. Long hours, uncertain income, brutal weather. Austin will work himself into the ground trying to provide, and you will spend a lot of time alone or doing hard, unglamorous work. It is not romantic most of the time. It is just hard." Olivia smiled. "I know. I am not naive, Clara. I know what this life entails. But I would rather have a hard life with Austin than an easy life with anyone else. I would rather work myself into the ground alongside him than sit in comfort without him. I love him. Not the ranch, not the idea of security, not the fantasy of what life could be. Just him." Clara's eyes were bright with tears. "Good, that is exactly the right answer, and for what it is worth, I think you are perfect for him. He is already happier than I have seen him in years. You are good for each other." "I hope so," Olivia said. "I really hope so." Austin proposed that evening in the most practical, least romantic way possible. They were in the barn together, checking on a horse with a sore hoof, and he was crouched down examining the animal's leg while Olivia held a lantern to provide light. "I have been thinking," he said, not looking up from his task. "We should get married." Olivia nearly dropped the lantern. "What?" Austin straightened, brushing hay from his pants, his expression serious. "I want to marry you, Olivia. I want you to stay here forever, not just as help or as Clara's friend, but as my wife. I know it has not been very long, but when you know, you know. And I know. So what do you say? Will you marry me?" It was so utterly unlike any proposal scene Olivia had ever imagined that she could not help but laugh. Here they were, standing in a barn that smelled of hay and horses, with her holding a lantern and him covered in dust and straw, and she had never been happier in her entire life. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Austin, I will marry you." His face lit up with joy, and he crossed to her in 2 long strides, taking the lantern from her hands and setting it carefully aside before pulling her into his arms and kissing her soundly. "I should have done this properly," he said when they came up for air. "With a ring and maybe some flowers and a pretty speech. I had it all planned out. But then we were here and you were right there, and I just could not wait." "I do not need pretty speeches," Olivia said, touching his face gently. "I just need you. This was perfect." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in the nearest town, which was called Sterling and was about 15 miles from the ranch. Clara stood up with Olivia, and a neighboring rancher named Daniel Morris stood up with Austin. The preacher was an elderly man named Reverend Johnson who had known Austin since he was a boy. There were perhaps 20 people in attendance, mostly neighbors and friends who were curious to meet the woman Austin Caldwell had so suddenly decided to marry. Olivia wore a dress she and Clara had sewn together, a simple but elegant design in pale blue wool. Clara had woven wildflowers into Olivia's hair, the early spring blooms that were just beginning to emerge. Austin wore his best suit, which Clara had brushed and pressed within an inch of its life, and he looked so handsome that Olivia's breath caught when she first saw him waiting for her at the altar. The ceremony was brief and traditional. They spoke their vows clearly and firmly, their voices steady despite the enormity of what they were promising. When Reverend Johnson pronounced them husband and wife and told Austin he could kiss his bride, Austin did so with such tenderness and joy that several of the women in attendance sighed audibly. The wedding supper was held at the ranch, with Clara and some of the neighboring women providing a feast. There was roasted beef and pork, fresh bread, potatoes, vegetables preserved from the previous summer, and 3 different kinds of pie. There was music, with one of the neighbors playing fiddle while others danced in the main room that had been cleared of furniture. Austin and Olivia danced together, awkward but laughing, and the happiness on both their faces was so evident that even the most skeptical of the neighbors could not doubt the match was based on genuine affection. As the evening drew to a close and the guests began to depart, Clara hugged Olivia tightly. "Be happy," she whispered. "You both deserve it." "Thank you," Olivia whispered back, "for everything, for welcoming me, for pushing Austin to tell me how he felt, for being my sister." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You are my sister now, truly. I have always wanted one, and I could not have asked for better." Austin had prepared the largest of the spare bedrooms as their marriage chamber, moving in some of the furniture from his own room and adding little touches that made it clear this was meant to be a shared space. When they finally retired for the night, both of them were nervous despite their love for each other. They were still learning each other, still discovering what it meant to be together. But Austin was patient and gentle, and Olivia was brave and willing, and they figured it out together. The physical expression of their love was awkward at first, fumbling and uncertain, but it was also sweet and surprisingly joyful. They laughed at the awkwardness, and they took their time, and by the time they finally fell asleep in each other's arms as the dawn light was beginning to creep through the window, they both felt that their marriage had been well and truly begun. The first year of their marriage was not easy, but it was good. Olivia learned the full reality of ranch life, the backbreaking work and long hours that Clara had warned her about. She learned to help with calving season, staying up through long nights to assist when difficult births required extra hands. She learned to shoot a rifle to protect the chickens from foxes and the stock from the occasional mountain lion. She learned to preserve meat and vegetables on a scale she had never attempted before, putting up stores for the long winter months. She learned to endure Austin's absences when he had to be out on the range for days at a time, and to welcome him home with warmth and joy no matter how tired she was. But she also learned the rewards of this life, the satisfaction of seeing the garden she had planted flourish and produce abundantly, the pride of wearing a dress she had sewn herself from fabric she had chosen, the deep contentment of sitting by the fire with Austin in the evenings, his head in her lap while she read aloud and he dozed, exhausted from the day's work, the fierce joy of waking up next to him every morning, of knowing that he was hers and she was his, bound together by more than just words. Clara thrived as well. With Olivia taking on more of the household management, Clara had time to pursue some of her own interests. She began raising chickens for eggs and meat, developing a small but profitable business selling her surplus to the families in the area. She also began teaching at the small school that had opened in Sterling, riding in twice a week to instruct the younger children in reading and arithmetic. She blossomed with the responsibility and the independence, growing from a girl into a woman with her own life and ambitions. That fall, about 10 months after the wedding, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She waited to be certain before telling Austin, and when she finally did, he was overcome with emotion. He held her close, his face buried in her hair, and she felt his tears against her skin. "I am going to be a father," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," Olivia assured him. The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down, and Austin fretted over her constantly. But the second trimester brought relief, and by the time winter set in again, she was feeling well and strong, her belly round and firm beneath her loosened dresses. They spent that winter preparing for the baby's arrival. Austin built a cradle from smooth, sanded wood, carving a simple pattern of leaves and flowers along the edges. Clara and Olivia sewed baby clothes, tiny gowns and blankets and nappies, their hands busy while they talked about what the baby might be like, whose features it would favor. The baby came in late March of 1883, 2 years almost to the day after Olivia had been left behind at that trading post in the cold. The labor was long and hard, with Clara acting as midwife since the nearest doctor was too far away to fetch in time. Austin paced outside the bedroom, unable to sit still, his face gray with worry. But Clara was competent and calm, and when the baby finally arrived with a loud, healthy cry, she wrapped it carefully and brought it to Olivia, who was exhausted but radiant. "A boy," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have a son." Olivia looked down at the red-faced, squalling infant in her arms and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. This was her child, hers and Austin's, a perfect blend of both of them. He had Austin's dark hair and what looked like it might be Olivia's nose, though it was hard to tell with his face still swollen from birth. "Let Austin in," she said softly. "He needs to meet his son." Clara opened the door, and Austin rushed in, his eyes going immediately to Olivia and the baby. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and when Olivia pulled back the blanket so he could see the baby's face, his expression was one of pure wonder. "He is perfect," Austin breathed. "Absolutely perfect. Is he healthy?" "Are you all right?" "We are both fine," Olivia assured him. "Tired, but fine. Do you want to hold him?" Austin nodded mutely, and Olivia carefully transferred the baby into his father's arms. Austin held his son with surprising confidence, supporting the infant's head and cradling him close. The baby quieted at his father's touch, his eyes opening briefly to show a slate blue color that might change as he grew. "What should we name him?" Austin asked, unable to look away from his son's face. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had never quite decided. Now, looking at this tiny, precious person, the decision seemed momentous. "What about James?" Olivia suggested. "After your father." Austin looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You would do that, of course. I never knew your father, but I know he meant the world to you. And I want our son to have a name with meaning, with history." "James," Austin said, testing the name. "James Caldwell, I like it. I like it very much." And so their son was named James, called Jamie by everyone who loved him, which turned out to be a substantial number of people. He was a healthy, happy baby who rarely cried and slept well from an early age, much to his parents' relief. He had his father's temperament, calm and steady, and his mother's curiosity, always looking around with wide eyes as if trying to understand the world he found himself in. Life settled into a new rhythm with Jamie's arrival. Olivia managed the house and cared for the baby while still taking on sewing commissions when she had time. Austin continued to run the ranch, but he made sure to spend time with his wife and son every day, coming in from the fields to hold Jamie and talk to Olivia about their days. Clara doted on her nephew, volunteering to watch him whenever Olivia needed a break or had work to do. 3 years later, their daughter was born, named Sarah after Olivia's mother. She was a more demanding baby than Jamie had been, fussier and needier, but with a smile that could light up a room. She had Olivia's coloring, lighter hair and eyes, and Austin's strong will. 2 years after that came another boy whom they named Thomas, called Tommy to distinguish him from any of the Thomases they might meet. He was somewhere between his siblings in temperament, easier than Sarah but more energetic than Jamie. The ranch prospered under Austin's careful management. He expanded the herd, built better facilities, hired seasonal hands when needed. Olivia's sewing business grew as well, and she became known throughout the region for her skill and fair prices. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and they had something more valuable than money. They had love, they had family, they had a life they had built together through hard work and determination. Clara eventually married Daniel Morris, the neighboring rancher who had stood up with Austin at his wedding. Their courtship was long and careful, but when they finally decided to marry, it was clear they were deeply in love. They settled on Daniel's ranch, which bordered the Caldwell property, and remained close to Austin and Olivia. Clara and Daniel had 4 children of their own, and the cousins grew up together, running wild across both properties and creating an extended family network that provided support and love for everyone involved. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin took Olivia back to the old trading post where they had first sheltered together. It had reopened under new management, but the owner allowed them to look around, curious about their story. They stood in the main room, now well-stocked and busy with trade, and remembered that cold, desperate winter. "You ever regret it?" Austin asked quietly. "Staying here instead of going to California?" Olivia looked at her husband, at the man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live. She thought about their 3 beautiful children, about the home they had built, about the community they were part of. She thought about the life she had imagined in California, alone and starting over with nothing but hope to sustain her. "Not once," she said firmly. "You chose me, Austin. When you came back that day and found me here, you could have just given me directions back to Georgetown and ridden on. But you chose to stay, to help, to care. And then you kept choosing me every day since. How could I regret that?" Austin pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "I did not just choose you, Olivia. I claimed you. From that first day, some part of me knew you were mine and I was yours. The rest was just figuring out the details." They stayed at the trading post only a short while before heading back to the ranch, back to their children and their life. As they rode side by side across the spring green pastures, Olivia reflected on how strange and wonderful life was, how a moment of disaster and abandonment had led to everything she held most dear. The years continued to pass, marked by the usual joys and sorrows of life. They lost Austin's prize bull to lightning one terrible summer. They celebrated when Jamie, at 18, announced he wanted to stay on the ranch and work alongside his father rather than pursuing education in the East. They worried through Sarah's rebellious phase at 15, when she decided she wanted to be anything except a rancher's daughter, only to watch her fall in love at 17 with a young veterinarian who shared her fire and matched her passion. They supported Tommy through his decision to become a teacher like his Aunt Clara, proud of his intelligence and his dedication even though it meant He would not continue the ranching legacy. Clara's husband Daniel died suddenly when they were all in their 50s, a heart attack that took him while he slept. Clara grieved deeply, but eventually found peace, moving back to the Caldwell ranch to live in the house that Austin built for her near the main house. She remained active and involved with her children and grandchildren, becoming the family matriarch and the keeper of family stories. Austin and Olivia grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down but their love remaining constant. They handed over more and more of the ranch operations to Jamie and his wife, content to advise rather than direct. They spent their days gardening, reading, playing with their growing collection of grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. One evening, when they were both in their 70s, they sat on the porch watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. Austin held Olivia's hand, their fingers intertwined, the touch as familiar and necessary as breathing. "You remember that winter?" Olivia asked. "When you found me at the trading post." "I remember every detail," Austin said. "The snow, the cold, the look on your face when I rode up. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen, standing there alone, refusing to give up." "I was terrified," Olivia admitted. "I thought I was going to die there. But you did not. You survived, and then you thrived." Austin squeezed her hand gently. "You have made such a good life, Olivia, for yourself, for me, for our children. I am so proud of you." "We made it together," Olivia corrected. "Every bit of it. We chose each other, and we kept choosing each other, and we built something beautiful from nothing but love and determination." "Best choice I ever made," Austin said. "Choosing you." "Best choice I ever made was letting you," Olivia replied. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. Around them, the ranch hummed with life, cattle lowing in the distance, chickens settling for the night, the sound of their grandchildren playing in the yard. It was a good life, a full life, a life worth living, and it had all started with a terrible winter storm, an act of abandonment, and a cowboy who chose to stay when he could have ridden away. Who chose to care when it would have been easier not to? Who chose love when he could have chosen solitude? Olivia had been left behind in the winter cold, but Austin had come back and said, "I choose you." And in choosing her, he had given her everything: a home, a family, a purpose, and a love that would last their entire lives. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Colorado sky, Austin and Olivia rose and went inside together, still hand in hand, still choosing each other after all these years. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the evidence of their life together. Photographs on the walls, children's artwork and school projects, quilts that Clara had made, furniture that Austin had built. Every corner held a memory, every room told a story. They prepared for bed with the familiar ease of long practice, moving around each other in the small space, their movements synchronized by decades of shared routine. When they finally lay down together, Austin pulled Olivia close, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "I love you," he said, as he did every night. "I love you too," she replied, as she always had. And then they slept, content and peaceful, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built a life that was exactly what they had both needed, even when they had not known what to ask for. The seasons continued their endless cycle. Spring brought new calves and planting. Summer brought long days of work and the occasional respite of picnics by the creek. Fall brought harvest and preparation for winter, and winter brought snow and cold and the need to huddle close for warmth. Through it all, Austin and Olivia remained partners, lovers, best friends. They argued occasionally, because no marriage is perfect, but they always worked through their disagreements with honesty and respect. They supported each other through doubts and fears. They celebrated each other's victories, no matter how small. When Austin died at the age of 78, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Olivia beside him as she had been for nearly 40 years of marriage. She woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. She did not scream or cry out. She simply held him close for a long moment, memorizing every detail of his beloved face one last time, and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the county. Austin had been respected and liked, known for his integrity and his kindness. But it was Olivia that people remembered most clearly from that day. Despite her grief, she stood straight and strong, accepting condolences with grace, comforting her children and grandchildren, making sure everyone was cared for. She was, as Austin had recognized that first day at the trading post, incredibly brave. Olivia lived another 5 years after Austin's death. She remained at the ranch, cared for by her children and surrounded by her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She continued to sew, though her stitches were not as fine as they once were, and she spent hours telling stories to any child who would listen. Stories about the old days, about the winter she met their grandfather, about the life they had built together. On the anniversary of Austin's death each year, she would ride out to the spot where he had first kissed her, that place where they had watched the sunset all those years ago. She would sit there for hours, remembering, talking to him as if he were still there. And in a way, he was. His presence was in every tree he had planted, every fence post he had set, every building he had constructed. The ranch was his legacy, but it was also a testament to their love, to what two people could build together when they chose each other and kept choosing each other through every challenge and joy. When Olivia died, peacefully in her sleep at 83, her family buried her next to Austin in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. Her gravestone was simple: Olivia Caldwell, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. But those who knew her knew that she was so much more. A survivor, a partner, a woman who had faced abandonment and loneliness and had found the courage to love anyway. The ranch continued under Jamie's stewardship and eventually passed to his children. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Austin and Olivia were together again, still choosing each other, still building their life together in whatever form that life might take. Because some bonds are too strong to be broken by something as simple as death. Some loves are eternal, transcending the boundaries of time and mortality. Their story, that tale of the woman left behind in the winter cold and the cowboy who came back and said, "I choose you," became more than just a family story. It became a reminder that rescue comes in many forms, that sometimes being left behind is the universe's way of putting you exactly where you need to be, and that the best things in life often come from the moments when everything seems to be falling apart. In the end, Olivia had not made it to California. She had not claimed the property her father left her or started the new life she had imagined on that wagon train. But she had found something infinitely better: a true home, a love that sustained her through decades, a family that was her legacy, and the certain knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. All because of a winter storm, an abandoned trading post, and a man who chose to stay when he could have left, who chose to care when he could have remained indifferent, who chose love when he could have chosen convenience. In the great story of the American West, with its tales of outlaws and heroes, gold strikes and gunfights, it was the quiet stories like this one that mattered most. The stories of ordinary people making extraordinary choices, of love found in unexpected places, of families built through determination and faith. These were the stories that shaped the land and the people who called it home. And so the Caldwell Ranch remained, a testament to two people who found each other when both needed finding, who built a life from nothing but love and hard work, and who proved that sometimes the best answer to life's hardest questions is simply, I choose you. The sun continued to rise and set over the Colorado plains. The seasons continued their eternal dance. The ranch continued to thrive under the care of Austin and Olivia's descendants. And the memory of that long-ago winter, of a woman abandoned and a cowboy who refused to abandon her, lived on as a reminder that choosing love, even when it seems impractical or impossible, is always the right choice. Because in the end, it is not the grand gestures or the dramatic moments that define a life. It is the daily choice to show up, to care, to work together, to love even when it is hard. It is the accumulation of 10,000 small choices, all pointing in the same direction, all saying the same thing, I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after, I choose you. And that choice, made and remade every day for 40 years, had been enough to build a legacy that would last generations. It had been enough to transform two lonely, grieving people into a family, a dynasty, a love story for the ages. As the stars wheeled overhead and the wind whispered through the grass, as the cattle grazed peacefully and new life continued to emerge every spring, the spirit of Austin and Olivia Caldwell remained, woven into the very fabric of the land they had loved and the life they had built together. They had started with nothing but hope and determination. They had faced challenges that would have broken lesser people, but they had chosen each other, and they had chosen love, and in the end, that had made all the difference. Their story was complete, their ending as happy as any could hope for, their legacy secure. And somewhere in the great beyond, they were together still, two souls who had recognized each other across the divide of loneliness and had reached out to bridge that gap, creating something beautiful and lasting in the process. The woman had been left behind in the winter cold. The cowboy had come back and said, I choose you. And from that simple choice had flowed a lifetime of love, a family that would endure for generations, and a story that would be told and retold as long as the Colorado wind blew across the prairie grass and the mountains stood eternal against the sky. It was a good story. It was a true story. And it was, in every way that mattered, a love story with the only ending it could have. They lived, they loved, and when their time came, they left behind a legacy of devotion that inspired everyone who knew them. The end had come for both of them eventually, as it comes for everyone. But the love they shared, the life they built, and the family they created continued on, a living testament to the power of choosing love over fear, commitment over convenience, and partnership over solitude. And so, in the quiet moments when the wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers across the ranch, when the sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, when new life entered the world squalling and perfect, the spirit of Austin and Olivia's love remained, blessing all who came after them and reminding them that the greatest adventure, the truest purpose, and the deepest joy in life comes from finding the right person and saying, simply and forever, I choose you.